Thank you for listening to the Christian Radio blog for this Saturday, September 10th, 2022, a day before September 11th, as we remember. We have not forgotten September 11th, a very important day in history of America, and let's never forget. Tonight's topic is going to be controversial for me because I don't really know how else to put it into words than just speak from my heart. I was just trying to put the best words together to describe an experience that I had. And I'm sure everyone has experiences. I just wanted to speak to it. The topic's demonology. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know the experiences that a lot of us have had. Everybody that has ever experienced some form of abuse by somebody, or maybe sleep paralysis, maybe other things that I might not think of at this time, but there could be all kinds of manifestations. And what I wanted to talk about is an experience that I had in April. I was sexually assaulted by somebody who definitely had demons. The presence wouldn't leave my home, and I was struggling a lot with it. And I called the police, of course, and contacted numerous hotlines to get help and support, but that wasn't really sufficient. What I was dealing with was a demonic presence that was in my home. I could feel it. I could sense it. I was having a hard time blogging, in fact. I went from blogging regularly, doing really well, to struggling. That's when I started studying on the topic of narcissists, and found out a lot of information about it, but that still didn't do really enough to find out specifically what I was dealing with, because the presence was so heavy in my home. I started learning about how to get delivered and what I needed to do to be delivered. And I don't know if anybody's ever had anything like that happen to them, but it's a struggle just even talking about it. But I knew it was a demon. And I started studying about Incubus and Succubus, and I realized that that's the demons that I was dealing with. And they're also responsible for sleep paralysis, believe it or not. If anybody hasn't learned what Incubus and Succubus are, they're lust demons. And you could get into a little bit more if you study more about the lust demons and Jezebel spirit, and a lot more about it. It's interesting. Before I get into this, Jezebel spirit's more common, okay? But Incubus and Succubus are really common. Now, let me take you back about almost 12 years ago. I was strangled by my ex-husband, and that's when I started learning a little bit about this topic. But like I said, I don't have any early knowledge of any of this until I started getting into it again. And it was much more painful this time because it was so invasive. And so when I talk about this, I talk about it from personal experience, but I want to switch the topic from being so personal to being more introspective and more from an observant perspective. The drugs that are used to induce any kind of sex magic is what I'm saying. Okay. You could use, for example, the drugs like crystal meth, heroin, cocaine, crack. Those drugs are used in these sex magic type situations, okay? Because we're in this time of year, there's going to be a lot of celebrations and parties and orgies, okay? Now, that might not pertain to us, but I just want you to be aware. That's where Incubus and Succubus and Jezebel spirit have a heavy presence is involved. Now, we talked about chemsex. Now, chemsex is more or less used with the gay community. Gay men use this as a form of getting, well, you fill in the blanks. Okay, I don't want to say what it's used for, but it's called chemsex. Okay, we've talked about some other things, prostitution, and why it leads to prostitution for girls that are sexually assaulted. Okay, because they're victims of a trafficking, and victims of trafficking oftentimes are led down this road. This is why we're having this conversation, because it is the victimization that we're talking about. So how do we talk about this topic and get free from it? Well, luckily, there's a lot of human trafficking victims that have networks where they can get help and they don't have to be a victim of the sex ring. And that is where I come in. I get that kind of help. Because it is human trafficking, what is being done to girls like me, and you would be surprised. I was caught off guard. I did not know that I was being manipulated by a narcissist and attacked. And that's all I could tell you. Can human trafficking victims get help? Well, I didn't state it earlier, but yes, they can get help. It's a lot of work on the hotlines. It's a lot of work as a victim and survivor in the sex trade business. There's a lot of people that say that to themselves, I'll never get out of this. But in reality, once you recognize that you have a problem in this whole situation, that's when you start getting the help. You have to recognize there's a problem. Because at first, I didn't even recognize there was a problem until I got attacked. I mean, this person had basically charmed his way into my home. So I didn't recognize there was a problem until it was too late. That's the seriousness of it. And I wanted to take the time to talk about it because here I am, a young Christian woman with all these other things going on, and I didn't even recognize I was being attacked. I can't even ignore the fact that young men are victims of trafficking and abuse and foster care. I know one member of my family has also been a victim of the same thing, so I don't want to ignore this. While I am at the end of this audio, I want to recognize that there are so many victims. If you've been a victim of this type of situation and you feel like you want to be heard, please leave me a message or contact me at jennysties@gmail.com. That's STYS. And I would love to hear from you. I know there's so many people like myself and like other members of my family who have been victims of the sex trade industry and also the foster care industry, where they too have been coached, groomed to be victims and also abusers themselves. So there's no doubt in my mind there's room for reform and care to the victims and survivors of this industry. And I am not the last person that's going to talk about this. I know that because there's a lot of people that are sharing their stories, bravely telling their stories, believe me. Thank you for listening to this broadcast at the Christian Radio Blog.